Jade Diaz learned how to read danger the same way she read balance sheets. Not by what was obvious, but by what someone had worked very hard to hide. In Miami, Danger wore linen shirts and cologne that cost more than her mother's rent. It walked into family restaurants with bodyguards and left with cash wrapped in butcher paper. It nodded at church on Sunday, donated to youth baseball on Tuesday, and quietly buried problems by Friday night. By 29, Jade could reconstruct a man's sins from 6 months of wire transfers and one lie in his tax return. She was a forensic accountant with a tongue sharp enough to peel paint and a reputation for dragging fraudsters into daylight. She could also still hear her grandmother's voice whenever she opened a spreadsheet. Mija, numbers don't lie. People do. People did. Especially family. Her younger brother Nico had always been reckless in ways Jade couldn't budget against. Fast bikes, faster girlfriends, bad ideas wrapped in good intentions. The call came at 2:13 a.m. from a number she didn't know, in a voice that sounded bored. Your brother skimmed from the wrong account. Jade sat upright in bed, phone pressed so hard to her ear it hurt. Who is this? Someone giving you a chance. 24 hours. Then the line went dead. By dawn, she had confirmed everything. Nico had been doing back-end bookkeeping for a logistics firm that was, in reality, a laundering machine tied to a cartel pipeline running cash through South Florida construction shells. He'd shaved percentages off dormant accounts, thinking nobody watched dead money. Someone always watched. She found him on her mother's porch in Little Havana, hands shaking, lower lip split. I was going to put it back, he said, voice breaking. I swear, Yaya got behind on meds. Tia Elena's mortgage. You stole from a cartel to pay family bills? Jade hissed, then dropped her voice when their mother moved behind the curtains. Do you have a death wish? He looked 22 and 12 at the same time. I didn't think that, Jade said, has been your brand since puberty. By noon, 2 men in tailored black suits were waiting outside her office in Brickell. They didn't touch her. They didn't have to. One held out a cream envelope embossed with a crest she recognized from East Coast headlines and whispered trial transcripts. A crowned M worked into thorned laurel. Moretti. Inside was an airline ticket to New York and a single line typed in precise serif font. If you want your brother alive, come alone. The Moretti estate in Westchester looked less like a home and more like a museum curated by people who enjoyed threatening museums. Marble floors, oil portraits with dead eyes, fresh lilies in crystal vases that probably cost more than her first car. Dante Moretti met her in a library lined with first editions and hidden cameras. He was taller than she expected, broad-shouldered, black suit fitted like armor. His face was carved into control, too calm, too still, like a blade laid flat on a table. Dark eyes that missed nothing. A scar at his jaw that looked old enough to have become part of him. Miss Diaz, he said, voice low, almost formal. Thank you for coming. Don't thank me, Jade said. Return my brother. One corner of his mouth shifted, not quite a smile. Straight to terms. I respect that. His lawyer arrived with a folder thick enough to stop a bullet. The marriage contract was 83 pages long. Family debts, all of them, erased within 72 hours of signature. Nico relocated, protected, and employed under supervised terms. Jade granted control of a private trust that no Moretti could touch. Full legal counsel at Moretti expense. An ironclad severance package should the marriage dissolve. Then the restrictions. No travel without security. No communication with federal agencies. No unauthorized access to specified rooms and records. And on page 64, in bold type, underlined once as if someone had pressed too hard with a key. Wife shall never open or attempt to access the basement level of the Moretti estate. Beneath that, penalties written in language so polished, it took a second to understand the brutality. Breach would void protective guarantees. Financial shields lifted. Prior debt histories and affiliations exposed to interested external parties. In plain English, if she crossed that line, her family would be handed to every enemy the Morettis had. Jade looked up from the document. "This isn't a prenup," she said. "It's a hostage treaty in legal silk." Dante held her gaze. "Call it what you want. It keeps your people alive." "And what does it keep in your basement?" His expression didn't change. "A line you won't cross." Jade wanted to throw the folder at him, wanted to claw his perfect calm to ribbons, wanted, with an ache that felt like acid, to go back 48 hours before Nico made one stupid, fatal decision. Instead, she signed. The wedding happened in a private chapel with 14 guests, 3 priests, and enough armed men to invade a small country. Jade wore ivory lace and diamonds she didn't choose. Dante wore black and looked like the groom in a painting where everyone dies by the final act. When he slid the ring on her finger, his hand was warm, steady. "I'll keep my word," he murmured, so only she could hear. "See that you do," she said through clenched teeth. In the marble halls of old money crime, wives were decorative diplomacy. Smile at blood-stained men, kiss cheeks, ask about children and vineyards, and never, ever ask where the money came from. Jade adapted fast. She learned which capos liked flattery, which spouses carried gossip like grenades, which servants were loyal to the house, and which were loyal to the man with the nearest gun. She kept her head down. She kept her books clean. She kept her heart out of it. Mostly. Dante was cold in public, controlled to the point of cruelty when crossed. In private, he was not kind, exactly, but precise. He noticed if she skipped meals. He replaced the lock on her office door after a soldier wandered in, by mistake. He left Cuban coffee on her desk on mornings after nightmares she never admitted having. He touched her like someone who'd learned tenderness in a war zone and didn't trust it to survive daylight. It would have been easier if he were only a monster. 3 months into the marriage, at a Moretti charity gala, Jade wore emerald silk and a smile that hurt her jaw. The ballroom glittered with donors, judges, socialites, and men whose names sat in sealed indictments. A string quartet played beneath frescoed ceilings while waitstaff floated with champagne trays and practiced invisibility. Around midnight, a waitress with nervous eyes brushed past Jade and nearly dropped a flute. "Sorry," the girl whispered. She couldn't have been more than 20. Blonde hair pulled into a severe knot. A silver charm bracelet flashed at her wrist. Tiny hearts, a little key, a Saint medal. Jade steadied the tray. "You okay?" The girl nodded too quickly. "Yes, ma'am." Later, Jade looked for her and couldn't find her anywhere on the floor. At 4:37 a.m., Jade woke to pounding, muffled, rhythmic, as if someone was striking wood through layers of stone. She held her breath. Again. 3 heavy thuds from somewhere below her room. Then silence so complete, she wondered if she'd dreamed it. Rain rattled the windows. The house slept. A door clicked down the hall. Footsteps. Dante entered their suite 10 minutes later, wearing a fresh white shirt, hair damp from the rain, tie gone. He paused when he saw her sitting up. "You're awake. What time is it?" "Late." He moved to the dresser, unfastened cufflinks, and set them down with careful quiet. Under the bedside lamp she saw it, a rust-brown fleck on silver, then another. Not his blood, she thought immediately, because Dante moved like a man uninjured. Her stomach turned cold. "What happened?" she asked. "Business." "That's not an answer. It's the only one you get tonight." He stripped off the shirt and dropped it in a laundry bag separate from the hamper like protocol. His torso was unmarked except for old scars crossing rib and shoulder. He caught her looking at the cufflinks. "It's handled," he said. Jade stared at him. "Is it in the basement?" His eyes snapped to hers, hard and instant. "Go to sleep, Jade." She didn't. She waited until his breathing evened, then lay awake until dawn with a phantom sound of pounding replaying under her skin. At noon, while the house reset itself with military efficiency, Jade took the back corridor toward the service stairs. The basement door sat at the end of a narrow hall paneled in dark walnut, reinforced steel disguised beneath old woodwork. Keypad, biometric scanner, camera dome in the corner. On the floor near the threshold, half hidden under a radiator grate, something glinted. She crouched and pulled out a silver charm bracelet. Tiny hearts. Little key. Saint metal, the same one from the waitress's wrist. When Dante found her there, his voice cracked like ice. "Step away from that door." Jade stood slowly, bracelet clenched in her fist. "Where is she?" "Who?" "Don't do that." "The waitress from last night. Blonde, scared, silver bracelet. This was on her arm." She held it up between them. "She's gone." His jaw tightened. For a second, something moved behind his eyes. Fear, sharp and raw, gone before she could name it. "Give me the bracelet." "No." "Jade, tell me what's in there." He took one step closer. Close enough she could smell rain and starch and gun oil lingering in his skin. "Listen to me carefully. Whatever you think you saw, whatever story you're building, stop. That door stays closed. You do not come down this corridor again." "Or what? You void my contract and feed my family to wolves?" His silence answered too well. She laughed once, bitter. "You really married the wrong woman if you thought a legal clause would scare me out of a question." "Not a question." His voice dropped lower. "A grave." She hated that a shiver ran through her at the words. By evening, the gossip circuits had their first whisper. One gala waitress never checked out with the rest of the staff. No police report filed. No employer listed. No one seemed to know her full name. At 8:12 p.m., Nico called from his apartment in Queens, the one Moretti Security had arranged, monitored, and called temporary stabilization housing. "Don't freak out," he said, which guaranteed she did. "What happened?" "I got tailed from work. 2 guys, black SUV, no plates. They waited till I got upstairs, then knocked. I looked through the peephole and one of them held up a note." Jade gripped the phone harder. "What note?" He taped it to the door and left. Her pulse thudded in her throat. "Read it." Paper rustled. Nico swallowed audibly. "The answer is under your feet." Jade closed her eyes. For a moment she couldn't hear anything except blood roaring in her ears. "Nico, are Moretti men with you right now?" "Yeah, 2 downstairs, 1 in the hall." "Do not leave. Do not open the door for anyone except Marco or Elena from security detail. You hear me?" "I hear you." "Jade, what did I do?" She swallowed past the burn in her throat. "You're alive. That's what matters." After she hung up, she stood in her office staring at the estate's internal financial dashboard glowing on her monitor. She had access to household budgets, philanthropic disbursements, and curated slices of Moretti corporate portfolios. Enough to keep her busy, not enough to see arteries feeding the heart. The basement clause sat in her memory like a lit fuse. She could obey and pray, Dante meant what he said about protection. She could obey and wait for the next girl to vanish. She could obey and trust a man who came home at dawn in a clean shirt and bloody cufflinks. Jade sat down, opened a new encrypted workbook, and typed a title. M Structure, Internal Reconciliation Audit. If Dante wanted lines, she could draw them too. Every number told a story eventually. She would find this one before it buried them all, because the risks were no longer theoretical clauses in polished legal language. They had faces. Her mother counting pills at the kitchen table in Miami. Nico flexing broken judgment and brittle bravado in a borrowed apartment. A missing waitress with a cheap silver bracelet and fear in her eyes. Dante, infuriating and impenetrable, standing between her and a locked door as if he were trying to protect her from a fire or hide that he was the one who set it. If she did nothing, she kept the marriage, the money, the illusion of safety, and handed control of her family's fate to men who measured mercy in body counts. If she pushed, she could trigger every punishment in the prenup and paint targets on everyone she loved. Jade had built a life on the belief that truth, once found, could be used like leverage. In the Moretti house, truth felt more like a landmine. Still, she reached for it. Outside, storm clouds rolled back over the estate. Deep in the house, somewhere under stone and steel, something metallic slammed once, then went quiet. Jade did not flinch. She hit save, locked the file, and began. The first anomaly surfaced 8 minutes in. Jade ran a reconciliation between the estate's declared charitable disbursements and outgoing wires from a Moretti-controlled logistics subsidiary called North River Preservation, LLC, a company supposedly dedicated to restoring historic churches. The money matched on paper. The memo lines did not. Stone sealant, imported tile adhesives, climate control units. Same vendors, repeating every 2 weeks, all invoices capped at $49,800, just under mandatory enhanced reporting thresholds. Classic structuring. Amateur criminals got greedy, disciplined ones got repetitive. She tagged each payment, cross-referenced shipment IDs, then opened the transport manifests attached to North River's tax packet. Pallets labeled architectural salvage had moved in refrigerated trucks at 2 a.m. and 3 a.m. from a warehouse in Red Hook to private properties upstate, so one recurring destination listed only as M Estate Sub-Level Service Entry. No one shipped marble in medical-grade refrigeration. By 2:16 a.m., Jade had 19 flagged transactions and 1 throbbing pain behind her left eye. She encrypted the workbook, mirrored it to an offshore drive hidden inside her trust account's document vault, and shut down the monitor when she heard Dante's footsteps in the hallway. He leaned in her office doorway, tie loosened, jacket over one shoulder. "You haven't slept. Neither have you." His gaze went to the dark screen, then back to her face. "What are you auditing at this hour?" "Your church renovations," she said sweetly. "Apparently God needs a lot of cold chain transport." A muscle ticked in his jaw. "Jade." "Dante." For a second they just looked at each other, both too stubborn to blink first. Then he crossed the room, set his jacket down, and braced a hand on the back of her chair. Close enough to be intimate, close enough to be a warning. "You want to protect your brother?" he asked quietly. "Stay inside the structure I built for you." She laughed without humor. "You mean the cage?" "I mean alive." He left before she could answer. By morning, Jade had migrated to the family office under the pretense of reviewing quarter-end philanthropic statements. The room was all walnut shelves and curated legitimacy. Framed hospital donations, scholarship galas, smiling photos with bishops and mayors. Beneath it sat a server rack, humming like a lie. She worked around direct denials by going sideways. Vendor tax IDs, freight insurance riders, customs declarations linked to shell addresses in Newark and Staten Island. Every blocked folder she hit generated a polite red banner. Access restricted. Level Nero. Black. She started a second map on paper. Old school because paper couldn't be remotely wiped. Arrows from shells to trusts, trusts to PAC donations, PACs to one recurring recipient. The Klein Civic Futures Foundation. Senator Robert Klein, reformist smile, anti-crime speeches, old money Connecticut vowels. She remembered him from the gala, hand on Dante's shoulder, grin too tight. By lunch, she had found 3 forged manifests, where truck VIN numbers belonged to vehicles that had been scrapped 5 years earlier. By dinner, she had enough to know someone inside Moretti Operations was moving medical equipment, identities, and cash through channels disguised as restoration work. What she didn't have was proof of destination beyond that locked door downstairs. At 7, she sat through a private dinner with 2 capos and their wives, while conversation drifted around wine futures and city contracts. Vittorio Rinaldi arrived 40 minutes late in a charcoal suit and predatory charm, kissed the air near her cheek, and settled across from Dante like a man claiming equal rank. "Jade?" Vittorio said, swirling Barolo. "Still civilizing our Dante?" Dante's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Careful, Vittorio. She bites." Vittorio chuckled. "I hear other things too. That marriage makes men sentimental. Slower." The table went a shade quieter. Jade sliced into her fish and said, "If he's slower, maybe it's because he's carrying dead weight." One of the wives choked on her wine. Dante didn't smile, but she felt heat from him like banked fire. Later, in the corridor outside the dining room, she heard 2 soldiers murmuring near the service stairs. Rinaldi's saying Don Carlo should have named him years ago. "Keep your voice down. Dante's distracted. Everyone sees it." She kept walking without turning her head, pulse steady by force. At 11:03 p.m., she checked in with Nico using their new protocol. One mundane text that meant, "You breathing?" She sent, "Did you pay Mom's cable bill?" He replied 30 seconds later, "Yeah. Tell her stop watching murder shows. Alive. For now." 2 days later, a body surfaced in the Hudson. Then another. Both identified as freelance security contractors who had worked events in Manhattan, including the Moretti Gala. One had a juvenile record sealed in Queens. The other had no fingerprints in any public database. Federal chatter ignited. A USA offices requested emergency records from private event staffing companies. A pair of dark SUVs idled outside Moretti Holdings downtown for 6 hours while agents carried out bankers' boxes. No raids, no arrests, just pressure. The kind that made men in this world start preemptively burying liabilities. Dante came home later each night. When he was home, he was split in 2. Steel in daylight, something almost careful in the dark. He'd pull her against him in bed like anchoring both of them, and then rise before dawn to take calls in another room. Voice low, language switching between English, Italian, and the silence he used when he didn't want her to hear names. On Thursday, Jade tried the basement corridor again at 5:40 a.m., timing it with kitchen shift change and guard rotation she'd tracked for a week. She wore running clothes, earbuds, and a pulse monitor like she was on an early workout. The outer hall was empty. She reached the door, scanned the panel with a concealed lens pen, and captured fresh prints from the lower metal rim where someone had steadied a hand. Before she could bag the sample, the camera dome above the lintel clicked and pivoted toward her. A second later, a tone chirped. Not loud. Worse, quiet and immediate. like the house taking a breath. Marco, head of internal security, appeared from nowhere with two men behind him. "Mrs. Moretti," he said, polite as a coffin lid, "this corridor is restricted." "So I've heard. Please return upstairs." She palmed the lens pen into her sleeve and smiled. Didn't realize jogging was contraband. Only in the wrong direction. Dante was waiting in her office when she came up. He shut the door softly. "You're forcing my hand. Try me." His gaze dropped to her wrist, where she'd hidden the print sample. "Whatever game you think this is, it ends now." "Then tell me what the hell is under this house." "No." The word landed like a strike. She stepped closer until there were inches between them. "Women are disappearing, Dante. My brother's being hunted. Bodies are floating up in your river. You want obedience? Explain." His control cracked just enough for anger to show. "Explanation gets people killed. People are already dead." He slammed his palm on her desk, making the lamp jump. "Not you, not him, because I said so." There it was again, not just command, fear. He left before she could answer, and she hated that she stood there shaking after he was gone. Complications came in layers. First, her encrypted workbook was copied. She knew because she seeded a fake discrepancy. $1.2 million routed to a non-existent pediatric clinic in Yonkers. And 48 hours later, Marco handed her a corrected packet with that exact line removed from every source file in the family office. Someone had seen her trail and cleaned it. Second, Nico stopped answering. At 3:17 p.m. Saturday, her check-in text sat unread. At 3:29, still unread. At 3:44, Jade called his secure line and got a dead tone. She called Marco, then Dante, then Marco again while already halfway down the grand staircase with her coat in hand. Dante intercepted her in the foyer. "Stay here. My brother is dark." "I know. My men are on it." "Your men were on it when someone tailed him, remember?" His eyes went glacial. "Do not mistake delay for failure." She jabbed a finger at his chest. "If he dies, I burn this house down with us in it." For once, he didn't tell her not to threaten him. He just nodded once and walked out to the waiting convoy. Nico was returned at 11:52 that night. Dumped in the rear alley behind his building, zip ties still on his wrists, shirt soaked through from sleet. Alive. Conscious. 2 fingers on his right hand, fractured clean at the knuckles. Jade got to him at the private clinic before dawn. He tried to joke when he saw her. "Good news." He slurred through pain meds. "I can still flip people off. Left hand works." She sat beside him and held it together until he slept. Then went to the corridor and dry heaved into a stainless trash can. Dante found her there, coat damp from weather and someone else's blood on his cuff again. "Who took him?" she asked without turning. "We're narrowing." "Did they send a message?" A beat of silence. Then, "Yes." She faced him. "What?" His expression was carved stone. "They told him to tell you to stop asking about what's under your feet." Her laugh came out jagged. "So, everybody knows the clause except me." "Not everybody. The wrong people." "Which are?" "Men who will use you to get to it." Before she could press, a nurse emerged with Nico's intake chart. On the bottom, where family contact notes should have been blank, someone had scrawled in pen, "Basement keys, open graves," not Nico's handwriting. 3 nights later, Vittorio Rinaldi cornered her in the underground parking garage beneath a Midtown art benefit, where Dante had sent her with 6 guards and strict instructions to leave by 10. At 9:43, she stepped out of the elevator alone after telling her detail she needed air. Mistake number 1. Vittorio was waiting beside a black Maserati, No jacket, collar open, looking like expensive sin. "You dismissed your shadows," he said. I'm flattered. I needed a cigarette. You don't smoke. Then I needed 5 minutes without men lying to me. He smiled. Now we're honest. She kept her purse in front of her, thumb on the safety of the compact pistol Dante insisted she carry. "Say what you dragged me down here to say." Vittorio leaned against the car. "Your husband is bleeding authority. He thinks he can run this family with secrets and sentiment. Some of us disagree. Some of you are planning a coup." His grin widened. Such an ugly word. Transition, maybe. "Get to it." He held up both hands. "Fine. You want your brother breathing? Your mother untouched? You help me." "How?" "Bring me what's in the basement. Ledger, drive, witness, whatever Dante keeps chained down there." Jade's face stayed neutral by force. "And if I refuse?" "Then when Dante falls, everyone tied to him burns, including your Diaz family in Miami and your little brother with the fragile fingers." He pulled a burner phone from his pocket, set it on the hood between them, and slid it toward her. "One call when you're ready to be practical." His voice softened, almost pitying. "You're smart, Jade. Don't die loyal to a man who married you as legal collateral." Her guards burst through the stairwell door then, too late to hear everything, right on time to watch Vittorio leave smiling. In the back seat home, Jade stared at the burner in her gloved hand and felt the world narrow to 2 bad choices and a locked door. The storm hit just after midnight. Wind tore through the trees around the estate hard enough to rattle old glass. Lightning strobed across the upper halls, turning portraits into ghosts. At 12:28 a.m., primary power flickered once, twice, then dropped. Backup generators kicked in with a low mechanical roar. Jade sat upright in bed, not pretending to sleep anymore. Dante was gone, called out at 11 for an emergency sit-down in the city after one of his Brooklyn earners was found shot in a parked car. Half the estate security had redeployed with him. Marco remained on site with skeleton staff. She moved. Black sweater, dark jeans, thin gloves, hair braided tight. She took the lens pen, the copied print she'd lifted, and the emergency facilities keycard she'd stolen that afternoon from the estate manager's clipboard under cover of a fire code inspection argument. Accountants noticed compliance details. Accountants weaponized them. In the service corridor, generator lights cast everything sickly amber. Rain hammered the old stone like fists. The basement hall camera was dark, not disabled, rebooting. A tiny status LED blinked red, green. She had maybe 40 seconds. Jade swiped the facilities card. The outer lock clicked. She pressed the silicone-lifted print to the biometric pad. Rejected. "Come on," she whispered, heart pounding. Second try. Rejected. On the third attempt, lightning cracked so close the walls trembled and the panel flashed, "Manual failsafe enabled." The maglock released with a heavy thunk. For one stunned second she just stood there. Then she pulled the door open and stepped into cold air that smelled of antiseptic. No dungeon. A narrow stair dropped to a reinforced level lit by battery strips. At the bottom, a triage bay. Stainless carts, IV poles, sealed boxes stamped with medical supply labels she'd seen in her audit. A pharmacy fridge humming beside a rack of trauma kits. Beyond glass partitions, 6 cots. 6 women looked up at her in terror. One was the blonde waitress from the gala, wrist bare where the bracelet had been. Another had a healing split lip and a hospital band cut in half. 2 clutched each other like children. One older woman with cropped gray hair stood between the cots and Jade instinctively, as if she'd done that before. Jade lowered her empty hands slowly. "I'm not here to hurt you," Nobody answered. A door at the back opened. Elena, Dante's female security lieutenant, usually posted on Jade's brother detail, froze when she saw her. Madre de Dios, Elena breathed. You were never supposed to... Never supposed to what? See this? See them? Jade's voice cracked. He told me it was a grave. Elena shut the door behind her and glanced at the women, then back. It is, if the wrong men find them. Words punched through Jade's confusion. Who are they? Witnesses, survivors. Girls pulled from transit houses tied to Rinaldi's pipeline. A judge's clerk, a county deputy's niece, a waitress who heard names she wasn't meant to. Elena nodded toward the blonde. We move them every 10 days. Here was safest until somebody started leaking roots. Jade felt the floor tilt. The missing staff reports. False trails. Sometimes we fake disappearances to keep buyers from tracking inventory. Elena's mouth twisted in disgust. Monsters call women inventory. Jade turned in a slow circle, seeing everything differently. The refrigerated shipments, the coded invoices, Dante's bloody cufflinks, the pounding under her floor. Not torture. Surgery doors. Panic knocks. On the far wall, behind a rolling med cabinet, a steel file drawer sat open. Inside were identity packets, passports, birth certificates, social security cards with fresh names. Beneath them, old ledgers bound in cracked leather, watermarked with a shipping company logo Jade knew too well. Diaz and Marlin Freight Consolidated. Miami, her father's company. Defunct for 15 years after his accidental death in a causeway crash. Hands numb, she opened the top ledger. Her father's handwriting slashed across columns of coded initials and routing numbers. Payments from entities she now recognized as early shells in the same trafficking network. Beside one entry, in different ink, a note. RD wants out after Caracas run. Too exposed. RD, Rafael Diaz. 3 pages later, a newspaper clipping folded into the ledger sleeve. Local shipping exec killed in single-car accident. Margins annotated in pen, not accident. Refused final transfer. Jade stared until the letters blurred. The prenup clause snapped into focus all at once, cruel and precise. If she never knew, she could not be compelled to testify, could not be charged as accessory through marital disclosure, could not legally contaminate protected witness channels. Dante hadn't just hidden a secret. He'd built a legal firewall around her with marriage as mortar, without asking if she wanted it. Footsteps thundered on the stairs. Dante hit the landing soaked from rain, gun in hand, eyes wild in a way she had never seen. Behind him, 2 soldiers fanned out and stopped dead at the sight of her among the cots. Out! Dante snapped at them. They withdrew. Elena stayed, rigid, until Dante gave a sharp nod. She guided the women behind the glass partition and closed the door. Jade had already picked up a pistol from the med cart, Elena's backup, safety off. Her hands were steady now in the way they got when the worst thing had already happened. She aimed at Dante's chest. He froze. Put yours down, she said. Jade, down. He set his gun on the concrete and kicked it away. Rainwater dripped from his coat onto sterile tile. For a long beat, neither moved. I was trying to keep you out of this, he said, voice rough. You married me into it. To keep you alive. To keep me ignorant. Her laugh was raw. My father laundered for this network. He tried to walk and they killed him. You knew. His silence admitted everything. She swallowed, throat burning. You wrote that clause, so if this place burned, I stayed legally clean while you decided what truths I was allowed to carry. I wrote that clause so no prosecutor, no capo, no corrupt cop could force your testimony and use your name to find these women, or your mother, or Nico. His eyes flashed. I would make the same choice again. Exactly the problem. She stepped closer, a gun unwavering between them, and for the first time since the chapel in Westchester, she spoke like a partner, not a hostage. No more locked doors, no more noble lies, no more making choices for me and calling it protection. Her voice dropped to a razor edge. You tell me everything. About Vittorio, about Senator Klein, about my father, all of it. Or I walk upstairs right now, hand these ledgers to the first federal task force that answers, and let this empire eat itself without us. Dante's chest rose once, slow. Above them, thunder rolled over the house like distant artillery. Jade didn't lower the weapon. Choose, she said. We burn it together or we die in it. Dante held her stare for 3 brutal seconds, then nodded once. Together, he said. Jade lowered the pistol a fraction, not all the way. Start talking. So he did. Not in fragments, not in the cryptic half-answers he'd been feeding her for months. In the basement triage office, with Elena posted at the door and storm lights strobing through the narrow windows, Dante laid out the architecture of the war. Vittorio hadn't just been skimming from Moretti operations. He'd been rebuilding an older pipeline. Girls moved through hospitality staffing fronts, medical debt clinics, and private transport contracts shielded by Senator Klein's foundation. Klein's people laundered campaign money through civic grants. Vittorio's crews converted human lives into cash flow. Corrupt precinct commanders made evidence disappear. A deputy U.S. Marshal had likely been compromised. Every time Dante tried to move a witness through formal channels, roots leaked within hours. So you hid them here, Jade said. I hid them where no one would think to look because no one in this house was stupid enough to open that door. She gave him a flat look. Except your wife. Especially my wife. He snapped, then exhaled hard. I knew if you saw this, you'd fight. And if you fought, they'd come for you first. They already did. He nodded, accepting the hit. Yes. Jade spread the ledgers across a stainless table, hands still shaking from adrenaline but mind locking into familiar precision. How many copies? 2 digital sets, 1 physical archive. 1 digital went dark this morning. Compromised or seized? Unknown. She pointed at the old Diaz ledger. This one? Original. Unique. Then it doesn't leave my sight. Dante didn't argue. He was past pretending control still belonged to one person. Upstairs, the house woke into emergency posture. Marco pulled outer perimeter teams inward. Elena started prepping transfer packs for the women, new IDs, burner phones, route bracelets with color codes. Jade built a clean room list of all personnel with any access to basement-adjacent logistics, then cross-matched them against off-book deposits she'd found in North River shells. One name blinked red in under 10 minutes. Paolo Ventresca, night dispatcher, low-level, forgettable. His salary was $68,000. His girlfriend's cousin had just bought a cash condo in Hoboken for $740,000. Dante read the screen and went still. He was on Elena's rotation board, meaning he saw transfer windows. Dante tapped Marco's secure line. Pick him up alive. No answer. He called again. Voicemail. Marco called back 60 seconds later, voice clipped and too calm. Ventresca's apartment is empty. Hard wipe on his devices. Neighbor heard suitcase wheels at midnight. Jade muttered a curse in Spanish. Dante's eyes cut to hers. He got warning. From inside this house, she said. Before Dante could respond, Elena stepped in, pale under olive skin. We have movement outside the south wall. 3 vehicles, no transponders. Rinaldi? Dante asked. Could be scouts. Could be a feint. His jaw set. Full lockdown. The next blow hit from 5 states away. Jade's secure phone lit with a Miami number she didn't recognize. She answered, already moving. A man's voice, warm as poison. "Mrs. Moretti, tell your mother she should pick a different pharmacy. That corner has terrible sight lines." A photo arrived before she could speak. Her mother stepping off a curb in Little Havana, grocery tote in one hand, a red laser dot frozen on her chest. Jade's breath stopped. If she's touched, not touched yet, we're civilized. Unlike your husband. The call ended. Dante saw her face and took the phone from her hand. One glance at the image, and something murderous flashed across his features. "They've widened theater," he said quietly. "Family pressure on both coasts." Jade grabbed his wrist. "Get her out now. New identity tonight." He nodded to Marco through comms, already issuing orders. Then another call came. This one for Dante. Routed through 3 dead relays. He put it on speaker. Vittorio sounded almost cheerful. "Cousin, weather's ugly. Shame if the roads got dangerous. Say what you called to say. You've got assets that belong to the organization. I want a private accounting at the winter ball. Basement assets included." Jade and Dante exchanged a look. Vittorio went on, voice silken. "Decline, and people you're sentimental about begin to disappear, starting with old women buying plantains." Dante's hand tightened around the phone until his knuckles blanched. "You touch her, you die slowly." Vittorio laughed. "Everyone dies, Dante. Question is who gets buried with a name." The line went dead. For the first time since she'd stepped into the basement, Jade saw the full edge of what could be lost in one night. 6 women who had survived hell, her mother in a crosshair, Nico with splinted fingers and no margin left, and a man beside her who might burn half the city before he let any of it go. If Vittorio succeeded, this wasn't just a coup. It was erasure. They moved before dawn anyway. Waiting meant bleeding. Plan A. Split the witnesses into 2 teams. Decoy convoy north. Real convoy east to a church-owned hospice wing in Queens, run by nuns Dante had used as a medical cutout for years. Jade insisted on riding with the real team and carrying the Diaz ledger in a lock case chained to her wrist. Dante wanted her in the estate panic room. She won by refusing to hand over the key code for her encrypted financial map. "You need my brain in the vehicle," she said, "not behind a vault door." He hated it. He agreed. Rain turned to sleet on the Hutchinson. Wipers fought slush in furious arcs, while city lights smeared into silver streaks. In the lead SUV, Elena drove one-handed, shoulder bandaged from a graze she refused to treat properly. 2 women sat crouched in the rear with blankets over their heads. Jade kept a tablet on her lap, live tracking convoy pings and police band chatter. For 12 minutes, everything held. Then a patrol car appeared behind them with lights dark, then bright, then dark again. Wrong pattern, wrong timing. Another slid in ahead from an on-ramp, boxing them. Elena hissed, "Not ours." The radio exploded with overlapping voices. Marco and the decoy convoy shouting about road spikes. Gunfire somewhere distant. A scream cut off. Dante's voice came through. "Abort route blue. Repeat, abort." Static swallowed him. The front patrol car braked hard. Elena swore, swerved, clipped the shoulder, recovered. A black van shot out from an underpass and slammed into their rear quarter panel. Metal shrieked. One witness cried out as her head struck glass. Jade drew her pistol with numb fingers. "Keep moving." A man in tactical gear leaned out of the van window and fired. The rear windshield shattered inward. The women ducked, sobbing. Elena returned fire through her side window, jaw clenched. The SUV fishtailed, slammed a guardrail, spun once, and stopped at an angle across 2 lanes. For a second there was only ringing, then chaos. Elena kicked her door open and shouted, "Out! Out! Go!" Jade dragged one witness free, then another. Headlights knifed through sleet. Boots pounded. Someone yelled, "Take the case!" A muzzle flash bloomed too close. The older gray-haired witness, the one who had stood protective in the basement, jerked and collapsed in the slush with a sound Jade would hear for the rest of her life. "No." Jade dropped beside her, blood warm on freezing asphalt, but Elena hauled her up by the collar. "Move or die." They ran between stopped cars as bullets snapped off steel. A second Moretti SUV screeched in from the shoulder. Marco's men spilled out, returning fire, dragging survivors into the back. Jade was shoved inside. Lock case still chained to her wrist, one witness missing, one dead, one in shock and bleeding from the scalp. The doors slammed. Tires screamed. By the time they reached a secondary safe site in the Bronx, dawn had turned the sky the color of dirty bone. Roll call came in fragments. Decoy convoy, 2 guards dead, 1 driver missing. Real convoy, 1 witness killed. Blonde waitress, Leah, taken. Elena, through and through gunshot, refusing hospital. Marco, alive, bleeding, furious. Nico's relocation team, delayed at checkpoint, then rerouted. Lost contact for 23 minutes. 23 minutes too long. When they finally re-established comms, Nico was physically present, but panicked, saying the safe van had been inspected by 2 officers who knew his name without asking. The hospice site was compromised before they even got there. Plan A was ashes. No quick patch existed. A woman was dead. Another was back in Vittorio's hands, if she was still alive. Their routes were burned, their personnel penetrated, and the enemy now knew Dante would risk open gun battles to protect basement assets. Jade sat on a crate in a shuttered warehouse room that smelled of bleach and old oil, blood drying on her cuffs, and finally let herself shake. She had chosen motion over fear, and someone had paid for it with her life. For the first time since signing the prenup, certainty cracked. What if all she'd done was speed up the collapse? Dante found her an hour later in a side office with no windows, just a folding table and a crucifix someone had left on the wall years ago. He closed the door and leaned against it, like his bones had forgotten how to hold him up. For a long beat, he said nothing. Then quietly, "Her name was Marta Ruiz, 46. She used to teach first grade in Newark." Jade looked up. He rubbed a hand over his face, and when he spoke again, his voice had lost its iron. "I made a promise to her yesterday. I told her she'd see spring." Jade swallowed hard. "Dante, no. Let me finish before I put armor back on." He crossed to the table and sat opposite her, elbows on knees, hands clasped so tightly the tendons stood out. When he finally met her eyes, there was no command in him. Just exhaustion and old grief. "I was 19 when Vittorio brought me to one of the transit houses," he said. "Said it was numbers training. Product in, product out. Teach the air how markets work." His mouth twisted on the word product. "There was a girl there with my cousin Sophia's laugh. Same chipped front tooth. Same way of pulling her sleeve over her hand when she was scared. I walked out, told myself it wasn't my lane yet. Told myself I'd fix it when I had authority." He stared at his own hands. 3 months later, Sophia disappeared from outside her dance studio in Yonkers. We found her in a warehouse in Elizabeth with 12 others. She lived 6 days. Jade went still. Dante kept talking like if he stopped, he'd drown. "I've run guns, extorted judges, signed orders that ended men. I know exactly what I am. But that, his voice broke, then steadied by force, that was the first thing I could not survive pretending not to see. He gave a hollow laugh. You asked why I made the basement a grave. Because it already was. Because once you love someone in this life, enemies turn them into a door. His gaze lifted, raw and unguarded. I married you to shield you, yes. I also married you because by then I was already lost over you. And that was the most selfish decision I've ever made. The room held the confession like a wound. Jade reached across the table and took his clenched hands apart, one finger at a time. You don't get to carry this alone anymore. He shut his eyes briefly, leaning into her touch like a man unaccustomed to gentleness he didn't have to pay for in blood. I don't know how to keep you safe and tell you everything, he said. Then stop trying to do both perfectly. Her thumb brushed the scar at his jaw. Do honest. I can survive honest. When he opened his eyes again, the steel had not returned completely. Something else had joined it. Fragile, terrifying, necessary. Trust, maybe. Or the first shape of it. He pressed his forehead to hers for one brief second, breathing her in like a vow, then stood when Marco knocked once on the doorframe. Boss, Marco said, face gray. You need to hear this now. Crisis arrived as a package with a silk ribbon and a burner phone from a compromised courier. By late afternoon, they were back at the estate under Fortress protocol. Power restored. Perimeter doubled. Every staffer confined, screened, or disarmed. In the library, Jade, Dante, Marco, Elena, and two vetted techs gathered around the long table while rain finally stopped outside. Marco dropped an evidence bag onto the wood. Inside, the burner phone Vittorio had given Jade in the garage, the same handset she had turned over to Marco for forensics after that confrontation. We pulled a sweep from Paolo Ventresca's getaway car, Marco said. Phone was in the trunk with this. He set down a cream invitation card embossed with the crowned M crest. Moretti Winter Ball. 3 nights across the bottom, handwritten in black ink. Bring the basement ledger. Bring the wife. Come unarmed, or we start mailing pieces. Elena swore under her breath. Pieces of who? Marco slid a tablet across to Jade. Video file? Timestamp 40 minutes old. Nico sat in a chair under fluorescent light, face bruised, left eye swollen shut. Not bound, but 2 men stood behind him just out of frame. Someone off camera held today's newspaper in front of him, proof of lifestyle. Nico's voice shook. Jade, I'm okay, don't. A hand struck him from behind. He grunted, bit back a cry. Another voice came in, electronically distorted. Winter Ball, Midnight Toast, the ledger and all original witness files in the basement. If federal flags trip, if Dante moves assets, if Mrs. Moretti fails to attend, the boy dies live. The screen cut to black. Jade made a sound she didn't recognize as her own. Dante's expression turned to carved ice, but his hand found the back of her chair. Grounding. Trace it. Tech number 1 shook his head. Routed through 12 hops and a cloned hospital relay. Could be anywhere in tri-state. Marco added. There's more. He opened a second file. A draft indictment packet, complete with federal seals and transaction charts. Doctored to make Jade appear as financial architect of the trafficking ring. Her trust accounts highlighted. Her signatures copied from prenup addenda. Enough smoke to lock her in pretrial for years if Klein pushed it through friendly channels. They're building a 2-front kill, Jade said, voice flat with dawning horror. If we comply, they take the witnesses and kill us anyway. If we refuse, Nico dies, and I get buried as the money brain. Dante looked at the forged packet, then at the Winter Ball invitation, and finally at her. Then we stopped reacting, he said. Outside the library windows, dusk bled into evening over the estate that had once seemed impenetrable. Now every corridor felt wired to a countdown. 3 nights. A kidnapped brother. A captured witness. A corrupted state apparatus. A house full of men deciding which loyalty would get them shot first. Jade picked up the invitation card, felt the heavy paper flex between her fingers, and met Dante's gaze. Neither of them spoke. They didn't need to. The war had chosen its stage. The war chose its stage, and Jade chose the choreography. 3 nights before the winter ball, she sat at the long dining table with 3 laptops, 2 encrypted drives, and a legal pad filled with arrows only she could read. Dante stood at the window, taking calls that sounded like threats wrapped as logistics. Marco and Elena argued over guard rotations in low, sharp bursts. Jade didn't look up when she said, "We're done playing defense." No one answered immediately. Then Dante turned from the glass. "I'm listening." She slid a spreadsheet toward him. "I built a counterfeit ledger package. Same shell names, same routing patterns, same handwriting overlays from the Diaz books. It's clean enough to fool anyone who doesn't run forensic depth." Marco frowned. "You're feeding him fake evidence?" "I'm feeding him greed." Jade tapped a highlighted line. "I also leaked through Vittorio's preferred gossip channel that Senator Klein is negotiating to buy the basement archive before Vittorio can seize it. If either one believes the other is making a side deal, they show up armed and stupid." Elena let out a short breath that might have been admiration. "And us?" Jade rotated another laptop so they could see. Estate schematics bloomed across the screen in red and green zones. At 11:58 p.m., I trigger a false breach alarm in the North Conservatory. That pulls Rinaldi's embedded men upstairs and away from the sub-level corridor. At midnight, all service doors magnet lock from central controls. Nobody in or out without my release code. Dante stepped closer, gaze fixed on her face. "You said 3 nights. This reads like suicide in formal wear." She met his eyes. "It reads like math. They're already killing people. We force all variables into one room, on one timestamp, under one recording chain." He went still at the word recording. Jade reached into her bag and set down a burner phone, then a second one, then her own secure handset. Real ledgers, witness identities, and Klein's foundation records are already mirrored to an anti-trafficking federal task force. Dead man trigger is set. If my biometric doesn't check in every 30 minutes on ball night, full dump auto releases to media, DOJ, and 3 international watchdog groups. Marco swore softly in Italian. Dante's jaw hardened. "You did this without telling me." "Yes," Jade said. "Because you love control more than oxygen, and I needed this live before you could talk me out of it." For one beat, she thought he might explode. Instead, he asked very quietly, "Do I at least get to know the check-in code?" She held his gaze. "After you promise you won't override it." A long silence. Then, "I promise." She nodded once and gave him the code. The Moretti winter ball glittered like a jeweled throat over a knife. Music swelled under chandeliers. Women in silk laughed too brightly. Men in tuxedos shook hands with fingers that had ordered kidnappings before breakfast. Snow fell outside in delicate white sheets, while armed soldiers rotated behind paneled walls and floral arrangements. Jade descended the grand staircase in black satin and old diamonds she no longer mistook for status. They were armor tonight. Dante waited at the bottom in a midnight suit, expression unreadable. When she reached him, he offered his arm. "You're pale," he murmured. "You're terrifyingly calm." "I'm not calm." His mouth barely moved. "I'm containing." She almost smiled. Good. Keep containing. Across the ballroom, Vittorio raised a champagne glass in mock salute. Senator Klein stood beside him in silver tie and polished concern. The picture of public service if you ignored the predatory calculation in his eyes. At 11:41 p.m., Marco sent the first coded signal. North team in place, 11:49. Klein security split. 2 unknowns in West Hall, 11:56. Rinaldi men drifting toward service wing. Jade's phone vibrated against her wrist rig with each update. She kept smiling through donors' small talk while her pulse counted down like a fuse. At 11:58, she touched the hidden control on her ring and triggered the false breach. Alarms didn't blare, that would spook the room. Instead, estate earpieces chirped with a discreet triple tone. Half the men on perimeter peeled away, exactly as predicted. Vittorio's eyes flicked toward the north wing, then back to her. Got you, she thought. At 12:01, a footman approached with a sealed card for Senator Klein. He read it, looked up, and sought Jade in the crowd, his face drained a shade. She lifted her glass and tilted her head toward the corridor leading down. Midnight accounting. Klein moved first. Vittorio followed 10 seconds later with 2 shooters. Dante and Jade went after them, flanked by Marco and Elena, then split at the basement landing by plane. Marco held the stairs. Elena locked the corridor behind them. Inside the sublevel triage room, fluorescent lights hummed over stainless steel and shadow. Leah was there. Alive, bruised, hands zip-tied to a chair, fear huge in her eyes. Nico knelt on the floor beside her, lips split, wrists bound. When he saw Jade, he made a strangled sound she felt in her bones. Yaya! Don't! Vittorio snapped, pressing a pistol to Nico's temple. Family reunion later. Senator Klein stayed near the door, sweating through his collar despite the cold. Give him what he wants, Dante. We can still contain this. Dante took 1 step forward. Vittorio shifted the muzzle harder into Nico's skin. Another inch, Vittorio said pleasantly, and your brother-in-law paints the tile. Jade moved before Dante could. She stepped between Dante and Vittorio's line of fire, hands visible, voice level. You wanted the ledger? I brought it. She held up the lock case chained to her wrist. Vittorio smiled. There she is, the practical wife. He jerked his chin. One of his men moved to take the case. Jade keyed the clasp and set it on the table, but kept her left thumb pressed to the underside, where the micro-recorder sat live. Before we trade, she said, the senator explains why my forged indictment has my signature from a notarization that happened 6 months before I entered this family. Klein flinched. This is not the time. It is exactly the time. Jade pulled a phone from her clutch and hit speaker. Because this line is being recorded for privilege review. Klein's shoulders loosened a fraction. He thought it was his counsel. Good. On the other end, an even voice said, proceed. Not counsel. Federal Task Force Relay. Jade looked straight at Klein. Tell your attorney who ordered the draft charging packet naming me as architect of the Klein Civic Futures transactions routed through North River Preservation. Klein's eyes darted to Vittorio. Vittorio snarled, don't answer. Jade's tone sharpened. Senator, if you stay silent, I open that case and your partner gets every real ledger before your immunity proffer exists. You become disposable in 60 seconds. Panic won. Klein licked his lips. The packet was precautionary. My chief counsel coordinated with assistant U.S. proxies, unofficially, using data from Rinaldi's people. It was to create leverage. On speaker, the voice said, for clarity, Senator, leverage against whom? Klein swallowed. Mrs. Moretti, her husband, any witness transfer. It was to keep assets moving. Leah let out a broken sob. Nico stared at Klein like he'd never seen a human face before. Vittorio realized too late what had happened. "You stupid." He swung his pistol from Nico toward the phone. Dante lunged. The shot cracked, deafening in the tiled room. Jade threw herself sideways into Dante's chest, shoving him offline. A second shot fired. Glass exploded behind them. Jade came up on one knee, drew, and fired once. Her bullet punched through Vittorio's right shoulder. He screamed, dropped his gun, and crashed into the med cart, instruments clattering across the floor. Everything detonated at once. Upstairs, gunfire erupted. Short bursts, then sustained automatic spray as loyalty split in the house above. Someone shouted Marco's name over comms. Alarms finally screamed. The lights flickered. Klein bolted for the door. Elena kicked it shut from outside and deadbolted it. He slammed into steel, rebounded, and slid down, babbling. One of Vittorio's shooters grabbed Leah by the hair and dragged her back, knife to throat. "Drop it, or she dies." Jade's arms shook but stayed trained. "You kill her, you lose your bargaining chip." He pressed until a red line bloomed under Leah's jaw. "I don't need bargaining." Jade's gaze snapped to the overhead oxygen manifold she'd seen during her audit. Valve wheel 3 feet above his left shoulder. She holstered in one fluid motion, snatched a surgical tray, and hurled it into the valve. Metal struck metal. The wheel spun open with a violent hiss. Compressed oxygen blasted into his face and eyes. He cursed, staggered blind for 1 second. 1 second was enough. Leah dropped. Elena, through the cracked door seam, fired a tight shot that took the shooter in the thigh. He went down screaming. Vittorio, bleeding heavily, crawled for his fallen gun with his left hand. Dante reached him first, kicked the weapon away, and drove him face first into the floor. "End him," Marco's voice barked over comms. "Boss, do it now." Dante pinned Vittorio by the throat. Forearm flexed, murder written plain in his eyes. Jade stood, chest heaving, and pointed her pistol at Dante. "Don't." He didn't look at her. "He killed Sophia. He killed Marta. He took your brother. Then he answers alive." Her voice broke, then hardened. "You execute him here, we lose the case, we lose the women, and we become exactly what they wrote in the indictment." Vittorio laughed wetly through blood. "You think cages and courts win this world?" Jade stepped to him, crouched, and spoke inches from his face. "No. Evidence does. Money trails do. Men like you hate numbers because numbers remember." She stood and looked at Dante. "Choose." The same word from the basement storm night. Dante's grip tightened once, then released. He shoved Vittorio onto his side and cuffed him with a zip restraint from the med cart. On speaker, the federal voice returned, now unmistakably active command. "Task Force Gray Line to on-site units. Entry team is 2 minutes out. Hold all principals." Klein started sobbing in earnest. Nico whispered, stunned, "Jade, what did you do?" She cut his bindings with trembling hands. "What accountants do, Carino. I reconciled." The house smelled like cordite, melted wiring, and expensive perfume gone sour by dawn. Federal agents and windbreakers moved through drawing rooms where blood-streaked marble. Capos sat zip-tied under Renaissance portraits, while EMTs stepped around shattered crystal. Snow on the terrace was churned pink. In the basement intake area, Jade gave her statement for the 3rd time, each answer clipped and precise despite the burn in her throat. Leah sat wrapped in a thermal blanket, refusing to let go of Jade's hand until an advocate arrived. Nico, patched and furious, argued with 2 agents about being fine, then almost fainted when he stood. When Agent Sloan asked to close historical gaps, Dante answered on record what had never been said aloud in front of Jade. The dawn he came home, in a fresh shirt with blood on his cufflinks, he and Elena had pulled Leah from a Rinaldi grab team and brought her into the hidden triage before sunrise. The blood was witness blood, and the basement clause had buried the incident to keep the protection channel from exposure. Dante signed his preliminary cooperation paperwork at a folding table set up where Moretti holiday centerpieces used to be sorted. He didn't ask for counsel first. He asked for witness protections in writing for every surviving woman in the basement network, for Nico and their mother, and for Elena's team. Agent Sloan, task force lead, read the list and lifted an eyebrow. You understand this level of cooperation burns your entire command structure. Dante's voice was flat. There is no command structure. You'll be charged. I said what I understand. Sloan looked at Jade, then back at him. You don't get to pick prison by nobility points, Mr. Moretti. I'm not asking for nobility. He signed. I'm asking for terms that keep them alive. When the papers were done, he stood and faced the handful of remaining Moretti captains held under guard. Some glared. Some looked relieved. One spat near his shoes. Dante didn't flinch. It's over, he said. Anyone still moving product under this name answers to federal racketeering and me. A bitter laugh from the back. You're not Don anymore. No, Dante said. I'm not. Jade watched the words land like a door closing forever. Outside, as sun finally cut through cloud, EMTs loaded Vittorio into an armored ambulance, shoulder bandaged, face white with rage. He locked eyes with Jade through the open doors and smiled with bloody teeth. This isn't defeat, he rasped. This is intermission. Jade stepped close enough that only he could hear. No. Intermission is when the audience wants you back. The doors slammed. Klein was escorted out next, wrists cuffed in front like he thought optics still mattered. Reporters had already gathered beyond barricades. As cameras flashed, he tried to straighten, to recover senator posture. Agent Sloan read the charges anyway, each count like a hammer. Conspiracy to traffic persons, obstruction, witness tampering, fraud, racketeering. For the first time, Klein looked small. 2 months later, Jade sat behind bulletproof glass in a federal holding visitation room with a legal pad and a cup of burnt coffee. Dante entered in county khakis, thinner, scar at his jaw more pronounced without tailored suits and controlled lighting. He sat. For a second, neither spoke. Then he looked at the pad. You brought work. You're about to sign your plea addendum. I trust you. I still verify numbers. A faint huff of laughter. There's my wife. She slid the document toward him. Cooperation credit recalculates at 72 months baseline. Downward departure to 30 with full compliance and testimony in 3 jurisdictions. Supervised release after. He scanned it, then looked up. You got it down to 30. You got it down to 30. By telling the truth, even when it made you look worst. Silence settled. Not hostile. Heavy, honest. Dante set the paper aside. Jade, I need to say this without strategy. She nodded. I loved you before I had any right to. His hands were flat on the table, knuckles scarred. I told myself marriage was leverage, protection, necessary structure. Some of that was true. But I also used those truths to hide that I wanted you near me in a life that destroys what it touches. His throat worked once. When you put a gun on me in that basement, I thought, good. If anyone should end me, it should be the woman I lied to. Jade's eyes stung. She stayed still. He kept going, voice low and unvarnished. You didn't end me. You made me choose a life I didn't believe I could have. I am terrified I'll fail at it. I am worse at softness than at violence. I wake up rehearsing disasters. But if you still want me after all of this, I will spend the rest of my life learning how not to hide from you. Jade let out a shaky breath that turned into a laugh at the edges. That was so emotionally competent, it's almost suspicious. His mouth curved, then sobered. Do you still want me? She reached across the table until her fingers touched his. I wanted truth. You gave it to me when it cost everything. So yes. Her voice thickened. I still want you, but we do this with rules. He nodded immediately. Name them. No locked doors between us. She held his gaze. Not in houses, not in accounts, not in our heads. Yes. Therapy. Together and separate. Yes. If you're spiraling, you tell me before it becomes an operation. A ghost of a smile. That one might need reminders. I'm an accountant. Reminders are my love language. He laughed properly then, brief and stunned by it. She hadn't realized how badly she needed to hear that sound until it was in the room. A guard tapped his watch, giving them 5 minutes. Jade slid another paper across the table. Not legal pleading, a post-nup draft. Clause 1, centered, bold. No locked doors between us. Dante read it slowly, thumb tracing the line as if it might cut him. You wrote this in all caps. So you don't miss it, he signed. When he pushed it back, his eyes were bright and unguarded. I don't deserve you. Probably not, she said softly. Good thing this isn't a merit system. The guard called time. Dante stood reluctant, then leaned down as far as the glass partition allowed. Jade mirrored him. Their foreheads touched cold barrier for one heartbeat, a promise through reinforced inches. 30 months, he said. I'll be here, she answered. On a clear October morning, Jade unlocked the old Moretti basement door with a key card that now read, Ruiz Trauma Clinic. Licensed access. No biometric traps, no hidden clauses. The steel had been repainted a warm matte blue. The corridor smelled of coffee and disinfectant, not fear. Walls that once held surveillance feeds now held framed watercolor prints done by survivors in art therapy. Leah stood at reception in scrubs, silver charm bracelet back on her wrist, typing patient intake with focused calm. When she saw Jade, she grinned. Your 10 o'clock is early and brought empanadas. Is that bribery? It's community engagement. In exam room 2, Elena, now head of security for the Survivor Network and still allergic to sitting still, argued with a contractor about camera angles that protected entrances without filming therapy doors. In the conference room, a social worker from Queens spread housing maps, while 2 women from the original 6 compared training programs. Jade stepped into her office, dropped her bag, and opened the morning dashboard. Grants in, disbursements out, legal trust allocations, payroll. Different battlefield, same principles. Her phone buzzed with a secure video call. Nico appeared on screen wearing grease-stained coveralls and a baseball cap from an auto shop in a relocation town he still refused to name out loud. His once broken fingers flexed around a wrench. You at the bunker clinic? It's a clinic, not a bunker. Tomato, tomato. Hey, tell Mom I sent photos of my apartment plant. It's still alive. Jade smiled. Proof? He angled the phone to a pathetic but living pothos on a windowsill. I'm basically a father now. Terrifying. His expression softened. You okay, Yaya? She looked through the office window at Leah laughing with a patient's child in the waiting room. Yeah, she said. I think, yeah. After the call, she walked upstairs to street level where a black sedan pulled to the curb. Dante stepped out in plain clothes, No entourage, supervised release monitor hidden under his trouser cuff, but no longer defining his posture. He carried 2 coffees and looked momentarily unsure, like he still expected someone to tell him he didn't belong in daylight. Jade took 1 cup. "You're late." Probation office ran long. Also, I got lost because normal people streets are chaos. She bumped his shoulder. "Welcome to civilian life." They stood a moment watching staff and clients move through the front doors, open doors, under the new clinic sign. Across the street, a news alert played in an electronics shop window. Senator Klein sentenced, Rinaldi convicted on multiple counts. Name scrolling, consequences landing. Dante followed her gaze, then looked back at her. "You turned a grave into a hospital." "We turned it," she corrected. He nodded, accepting the gift and the accountability in one word. Inside, they passed the old basement threshold together. No one locked it behind them. Jade paused in the hallway, listening. Distant voices, a copier whirring, someone crying softly in a therapy room, and someone else speaking comfort in Spanish. Life, messy and unsanitized. Once, she had learned to read danger by what people hid. Now she read something else in the open ledgers, open rooms, open hands. Not safety exactly. She was too honest for fairy tales. But chosen truth, audited daily, signed in both their names.